Yeah. Hmm.
Well, Niara, you've got a very extensive bio here.
Yeah. Hmm.
And for readers who haven't, they've only sort of turned up in the last few years,
Hmm.
we go back quite a while. We go back to the International UFO Congress in Laughlin,
Hmm. Yeah.
Bob Brown, and I think you were being interviewed with the wonderful Mary Rodwell.
Actually, I was, yeah. Well,
This was
my
in what I call a
presentation,
back room.
yeah, the presentation that I did was with Melinda Leslie
All
up
right.
on the stage.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
on the stage. Do you have a
Yeah.
year on that?
Uh, I think it was 2010.
Yeah, 2010, an awful lot of things happened.
Yeah. And then I did have a hypnosis session with Mary Rodwell at the UFO Congress, privately, of course. But
Yes.
yeah.
And we did a little bit of an interview. By the way, this is a Basis Project mug,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all unique. This batch.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of
Cool.
mine who is an experiencer added this little bit artwork in the eyes.
Mm-hmm. It's nice.
And the thing is, it's always interesting to see what an experiencer adds. She's just, so that's her logo that she gave. So the
Mm-hmm.
point is that I then did some interviews with you with Mary Rodwell separately, but also with yourself, and that's what I call the backroom interviews. And it's after
Mm-hmm.
being deplatformed in 2021, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of that material was lost. Not that I didn't have backups, but the hard drives were hit as well. I've got
Yeah.
a whole pile of hard drives,
Yeah.
and they just don't work. And when we all upgrade to Windows 11, an awful lot of stuff's not going to work.
Yeah.
That's
Mm-hmm.
coming up in September, where they encourage you to keep all your media on their servers. And if you're a
Yeah.
naughty person,
Mm-hmm.
so don't
I don't
control.
keep anything on their servers. I keep nothing on their servers.
Yeah, and unplug the
I
network cable.
I've been fighting to stay away from Windows 11 all this time. I don't want it. I never wanted Windows 10.
Well, I think if you unplug, actually, if you physically unplug, do not plug in a network port. Keep the computer without anything plugged in. Now, having said that, I think they can access the stuff without having the network in it.
Mm-hmm.
Disable Wi-Fi and all that.
Yeah.
But
Well, I have Ethernet connections for most of my stuff here. I'm using Wi-Fi today to do this interview, but most of the time I use an Ethernet connection, and when I'm not using that computer, it gets unplugged.
yeah, that's. I think
So,
this is only paranoid people would think about doing that. And whilst I'm sitting here, I'm in Wiltshire, although officially, apparently, this is a crop circle.
hmm
So I don't know what that's meant to actually represent. But
hmm
I
looks
found
like
out
the
I
great.
found out a couple of minutes ago that actually I'm not located in Wiltshire anymore. I'm located in South Gloucestershire,
Mm-hmm.
which is lots of military facilities there. So maybe we're going through a server helping our country
Mm-hmm.
fight the bad guys. So the
Yeah.
point about that is you had your initial experience was in what we might call Area 52, Papoose Lake.
51.
It's 51, but it was a radar facility. Do you want to go through that?
Um, sure. Yeah. It's
Just as a quick heads up.
yeah. There's a lot of interviews out there and documentaries in which I talk. The best documentary I was in was Above Majestic. And they just let me talk about my experiences. They didn't have any other agenda to twist my interview to fit into their agenda. Very, very good. There's some other people interviewed in that film as well. A lot of other people actually, but my interview was very genuine and I told the truth according to, what I remember
Well,
and
that's
what
all
I
we
had
can do. That's all we can
researched.
do.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So, I was in the Air Force from 1979 to 1983, and I worked in auto track radar. And if this is a special radar that is for tracking aircraft in the sky to shoot them down. So it has to track them with a very narrow beam, what they call a pencil beam. And I was first off, I should say I discovered 3 months of missing time in conversation with a friend. And this was terrifying to me because I had a good memory of everything else in my life. And then later on that year, I met with Bud Hopkins.
The late Bud Hopkins, yeah.
Yeah, at a conference in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I had hypnosis with him. And then I got a chunk of what had happened to me. And basically, I'll kind of put the two different hypnosis sessions together when I explain this, because one fills in the blanks for the other. So basically, I was pulled out of my motel room. They had us staying in motel rooms in Tonopah, Nevada. They didn't have regular barracks up there. They just put us up in motel rooms. I was pulled out of that motel room at gunpoint. I was given fatigues to wear with no rank insignia, no name tags, no identifying marks, put into like a suburban vehicle, which was what they used out there on the range, taken out in the middle of the night. And they said we were going to test the radar on experimental aircraft, or special aircraft. And so we were in the radar van. We didn't actually see the aircraft. We just saw blips on the screen. But when we tried to get a radar lock on them, they would just literally disappear off the scope. So they just couldn't be tracked. Then the test was over, and me and two other people were instructed to stand out on the radar van deck. And it was nighttime. We were threatened not to speak to each other and compare any notes about what we'd seen or experienced in the test. So all we were doing is standing out there, looking up in the sky. And there was either an extraterrestrial craft or a back-engineered extraterrestrial craft up in the sky. There were several up there, but the one that was closest was the one I was looking at. The others were far away. And I was terrified to see it because I didn't have a high enough security clearance to be seeing that. And to really understand that security clearance stuff, if you're going to be briefed and working on, highly classified projects, then you get all the information. If suddenly you're exposed to something that is highly classified without any explanation, it's a scary thing because you wonder what the hell is going to happen to you next. And what did happen to me next was I was put on a bus. I was taken to what I feel was Area 51, to a medical facility there. And there, they sat us there were several of us, and we sat in a waiting room with the lights off. And one by one, we went in this little side room. When it was my turn to go in that little side room, there was a security guard there standing at parade rest with a sidearm. I was told to lay down on a stainless steel examining table. And then some man in a white lab coat came in and walked past the security guard up beside the right side of my head and said, "Stay calm," in a deadpan monotone voice. And when he got up beside my head, he injected me in the side of the neck with some kind of experimental compound or drug, sent me straight into shock. And then I was dragged down a very long flight of stairs and tossed in this small room. And there was a one-way window there, and they watched me go through the effects of that injection in that little room. And it was like horrific. I've had a lot of years to try to put it together, exactly what I felt. And the best explanation I come up with is my body felt like it had been completely injected full of Novocaine, and the Novocaine was starting to wear off. And when you go to the dentist and the Novocaine starts to wear off, there's this strange feeling, pins and needles. Well, magnify that like times 100, and I was feeling that over my whole body. And I laid on that floor, just curled up in a ball, screaming, because it was just so intense and so uncomfortable. Then finally, the effects of it started to subside, and then I was pulled out of that room, and I was sexually assaulted by 2 security guards. 8 people watched that, and I have a feeling that they were there under threat, that like if they worked up at Area 51, They were watching it. They didn't want to watch it. Obviously, some of them were like trying to turn their faces away, or feeling disturbed. From what I could see of them, when I could see them. And there was a gray ET, like a tall gray ET, also watching. And I think that they were there as a threat. They were kind of there. Probably somebody told them, if you ever talk about what you're working on up here, this is what's going to happen to your wives and daughters. What's happening to this woman, me. And so that was the opening of the door to those lost memories of 3 months between January of 1980 and to April of 1980. And it was pretty horrific. And I had hypnosis with a lady named Gloria Hawker in 2003, filled in a lot of the blanks of what happened with that, looked at childhood ET abductions and other things. And in that hypnosis session, I learned that I had gone to the moon. I'd been taken on a craft to the moon. And it was a quick trip. It wasn't like when the astronauts go to the moon. This craft would go quite quickly. My guess was being on the craft was kind of disorienting, but I'm guessing that the flight took somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 minutes to get to the moon. And when I was there, I was used at hard labor for a week, and then also expected to be used in a sexual situation with lots of different women and men in the room. And,
can you go
yeah.
into detail about what the place looked like, languages used?
Mm-hmm. What the moon looked like?
Yeah, everything. Just try to go through every step as you went through.
When I got off the craft,
like what shape was the craft?
it was a saucer-shaped craft. It was a saucer-shaped craft. And before I got on, I was given clothing to wear that was it was silvery, and it was kind of shapeless. But when you put it on, it fit itself to your body. It's like it wouldn't matter what size your body was; it would fit to it, And there were gloves and boots and everything else like that. So that's what I wore on the trip. When I was on the craft, I had to lay down on the floor like cargo, and 2 other people were being transported with me, two other male people. Then we got there, we got off the ship, they said, you are to look only straight ahead. You are not to look to the right or the left or any place else. Just look straight ahead and walk to the building directly ahead of you. So this is what I experienced. I kept my head pointed straight ahead, but I couldn't help but try to look up with my eyes and try to discern, is there a dome up there or is there atmosphere here? I couldn't really tell. I just had to keep walking straight ahead. I went into this building.
Well, what was it like? Was it colors? What the colors like? What did the other people?
I don't remember much in the way of color. Everything seemed kind of flat colored. Gray or
what sort of uniforms?
dark.
What sort of people were they there? Were they? I got to give a leading question. Did they speak German?
I didn't hear German. No, I just heard English. There were people there in military uniforms, and there were people there in kind of bland colored uniforms. There wasn't much color from what I remember.
I'm going to ask another question. Did you see any vehicles there? Like little buggy cars or something?
No, I didn't see that. Most of the time I was inside that building, and inside the building it was just like a building on Earth. There was a big room that they put us in. They had me and other women there that were just meant for the men that worked up there, and we were passed around from man to man in a sexual kind of situation. And then I didn't get to sleep while I was there. Okay, there was no sleeping. So I got put in a different room where I had to be moving boxes and stacking them, moving them from one place to another, kind of a labor sort of job. And they didn't give us hardly any decent food, just water and like maybe bread and water, but the bread was, dry. So there wasn't hardly any eating. There was no sleeping. During the day, I was working. During the night, I was in that sexual arena.
But how did you get to food to sustain yourself? I mean, what about feeling hungry or what?
If you felt hungry, it was too bad. There wasn't anything other than what you were given, and it's really part of the thing. When people don't want you to remember things, they limit what you can see and what you can hear as much as they possibly can, and they also threaten you not to talk to other people. So they really have you pretty much isolated, and they will enforce it in unpleasant means. It's, they're very threatening, and you do
what sort of unpleasant means without causing you trauma or anything like that?
Well, people had guns there. Trying to think. I know that I just didn't push them very much. I did what I was supposed to do. So I didn't really get punished, but I was worried that maybe they'd stick me out on the surface of the planet where maybe there was air, maybe there wasn't. That was something. I don't think they'd leave you out there long enough to kill you, but enough to make you really uncomfortable. And
now you're saying planet rather than moon here.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a thin atmosphere there. I think it's very thin. I think that was kind of like an experiment that was only a little bit successful. I think they planted some kind of algae on the moon that was supposed to make oxygen. And it did, but in every place where the sun hit the ground, it killed the algae very quickly. The cosmic rays and everything killed, the light killed it. And so it grew in the cracks and crevices on the moon, but it didn't grow out in the full light. And therefore it didn't make as much oxygen as they were hoping for. That's just my guess. Because I was there as slave labor. I wasn't told anything. So, and here's the quirky thing. When I worked at the test site, up on the radar range, we had two sets of crews. One set of crews would be in Las Vegas at the Nellis Air Force Base, and the other set of crews would be working up at the radar range. And so when I was up at the radar range, and they took me to the moon, the people I ordinarily would have worked with there were told I was just sent back to Las Vegas on one of the buses because I got sick. And I'm just making sure my phone doesn't ring here. Do not disturb there. And so all the people that I would have ordinarily been working with up at the range thought that I was back in Las Vegas because I'd gotten sick and got sent back home. And then all the people I would have worked with down in Vegas thought that I was uprange. So I could go missing for a week and nobody really raised an eyebrow.
Right.
And yeah, so that's kind of that. And where do you want to go from here? Or do you want
It's
me
entirely
to
up to you. We've got all the time in the world.
Yeah. Well,
this is to give as much detail as possible.
Yeah. Well, there's this Mars thing that's kind of haunted my whole life from childhood. I've been fascinated with it. Really felt like I wanted to go there. Really was just curious about it. I still have the old Time magazine that came out in, when I was a kid. And it was an issue about Mars. I have books on terraforming Mars, all this other stuff. And I haven't had any memories in this regard, but I know that there are other people that have had a 20 years and back on Mars that were groomed as children for the Mars missions that they were going to go on in early childhood. And I
Now,
don't have
to
any.
those who don't know what 20 and back means, could you give a brief explanation?
Yeah, 20 and back is when, well, let me just say it, start it this way. You know, when the Roswell crash happened, okay, it said that about 600 people were killed to keep that secret, and that raised a lot of eyebrows, and it kind of perpetuated what happened at Roswell more than the powers that be wanted it to be. I mean, they didn't want it to be out there. So I think they learned that they couldn't just do away with people. You know, people had to still be in their lives intact. So a 20 and back is when they take a person out of their life on Earth and they send them to live and work on Mars or the moon or other places in the solar system, like moons of Jupiter and moons of Saturn. They send them to live and work there, and they live and work there for 20 years. And then they are taken out of that life. They're put into a situation where their memory is completely erased. And then they're brought back to Earth, and they're put back into their Earth life just before they were taken. And this involves time travel. Okay. Which, we definitely have time travel technology. And if you think about it from Einstein's equation for special relativity, the faster you go towards the speed of light, the more time
Well,
shifts.
Einstein is a complete distraction, load of hooey.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
All
Well,
Einstein does is establish a timetable for you to get a train. That's all.
Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of mind bending, but you get put back into your Earth life maybe hours before you were actually taken before. And so then there's no missing time. There's no place in your life for any strange memories that might come up, because when would it have happened? Because your life just kind of seemed like it continued from point A to point B without anything unusual happening. So that's what a 20 and back is. You're taken out of your life at a certain point. You go to work, live and work someplace else in the solar system, Mars or other places. And then after you've worked there and they've done what they wanted to do with you, or had you work in whatever capacity for 20 years, then they take you out of that. They wipe your memory. They put you in a med bed to regress your age back to the time that you were, the age that you were when you were taken out. And then they put you back in your Earth life just before the time that you were originally taken. And this is to try to cover their tracks, to use people and then cover their tracks so that no one's the wiser that they had 20 years of experience on another planet. Okay, the reason that I wonder about it is because I had all this stuff I was interested in about Mars was a kid, but then after I got out of the situation in the Air Force at the radar range, I had a terrible nightmare. It was a nightmare of living and working on Mars, and very vivid. And there, for some reason, I just had this powerful compulsion to visit one of the laboratories on Mars where they were supposedly doing genetic experiments. And so I somehow talked somebody into getting me down into that underground level, getting me through the lab. And I got into the lab. I was all by myself. I had a card key that somebody had given me to get through the checkpoints. And I walked through the lab, looked around a little bit. But what I really did was I walked through the door on the other side of the lab. And when I walked through the door on the other side of the lab, it was like going into a dog shelter where there's chain link kennels on both sides and like a hallway. And inside each one of these kennels, Not all of them, but several of them had these bipedal humanoid beings that looked like they could be part human and part something else. And I'm looking at these and I'm thinking, my God, I'm going to get in real trouble if they find me here. Well, they had figured out that I was there anyway. So I was looking at these bipedal humanoid beings, and then someone grabbed me from behind in this nightmare, put it like a chloroform rag over my face, and I lost consciousness. And when I came to, again, in the nightmare, I was in what was like a space escape pod from a ship.
Before you go that
ship,
far, can you describe any
yeah.
features of these bipedal beings?
Well, they didn't have hair, or if they did, they didn't have much hair. For some reason, I'm remembering kind of an orangish skin.
But what made them? What made you call them bipedal beings as opposed to just humans, which were,
Well,
what was the striking feature that
they
made
weren't
them
human, I guess they you could call them part human, but they were just very odd looking.
But what was the odd features?
There was disproportionate in the length of the arms to the torso or to the legs. Like maybe the arms would be really long in a disproportionate way to the rest of the body. The eyes, looked different. I'm trying to figure out how, think about it. I haven't thought about it in a while.
I don't want to give you any leading descriptive things, so it's up to you.
I understand.
And we're not facing we're not catching an express train, so
I know. The problem is I didn't see them very long. What really impressed me about the one that I was looking at that was closest to me was how terrified he was. And he looked sick. And he looked like he wasn't doing well. And my guess was the genetic blend between human and whatever he wasn't working out well. He looked kind of sickly and like he was really suffering. And I seemed to get a telepathic message from him asking me to kill him because he was suffering so much. And I had thought back to him. I said, I can't do that because then they'll know I was here for sure, and I'll be punished. And that was about the time that I got grabbed from behind and the chloroform rag. And then when I woke up, I was on the escape pod floating out in space. And so I figured that escape pod probably had air for 48 hours, but they'd taken the food and the water out and just left me out there floating in space. And this was psychological punishment for going into that laboratory where I was not supposed to be. And so
now, is this on Mars or the moon?
This is Mars. This was Mars.
Okay.
And so I went through every extreme of emotion inside that pod that you could imagine. I recently thought that I want to start drawing a picture of it to try to define more what I was seeing and what I was entrapped in. I'll let you know when I get when I start getting drawings done. It's just starting to get a little arthritis in my hands, so it's not easy to draw.
That's often due to little mini parasites. If you get hold of a Rife machine, a Royal Rife machine, it gets those little things away. There's toxins.
Yeah, well, we'll see what I can do.
Okay.
But so anyway, I went through probably about 48 hours in that pod. I got really angry. I tried to break the window so that I'd die quickly. That didn't work. Then I cried hysterically for a while, and until that emotion was spent. So
can you describe the pod? Any features? Any things that the pod was? I mean, it must have some kind of guidance system or something.
Well, if it had a guidance system, it was not something that I could figure out.
There's no control panels or any kind of features. I'm looking at styles of buttons or the physical manufacture of the structure of it.
Well, it's round. It was round. So it
As
was
in a
like
sphere.
spherical. Yeah. And it was small enough that, I mean, I could get up and move around a little bit, but and I think I could stand up in it. And but not much other than that. And then the place where there should have been food and water, there wasn't any. Um, that's why I think I need to try to do drawings, because it's easier to just think about it and let it flow from the drawing into the drawing than it is sometimes to describe it. I just I guess the reason I'm having a hard time with the physical description is because I'm pretty anchored in what I was feeling, like just enraged until I couldn't feel any more rage, and then I cried until I couldn't feel any more grief, and then I even laughed hysterically until I couldn't laugh anymore, and then all my emotions were like spent, and I was exhausted, and they did leave recording equipment on, so I pushed a button to record a message and recorded a message for anybody who would find me, and tried to explain to them why I found myself out there. And then I was just kind of gasping my last breaths of air. Again, this is the nightmare I'm not, I'm describing. And suddenly the pod shook and there was a clang, and I realized the pod was being retrieved. And they opened the hatch, and air came rushing in, and I took a big gasp of air, and then I woke up in my bed. And so that nightmare has stayed with me all my life. It was really powerful. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. So that was a nightmare. So that's one of the dots, okay? There's the childhood fascination with Mars. Then there's this nightmare that I had within a month, I would say, of getting out of the things that happened to me at Area 51. And then in 2010, I was at the UFO Congress, and I had a hypnosis session with Mary Rodwell. And during that hypnosis session, I visited the Lyran mothership, because I feel like I'm a Lyran starseed. And I went there and I visited, and that was a pretty remarkable experience. You go on that ship. It's like all the senses, all the 5 senses that we have down here that are separate, they overlap. So if you're seeing a color, you can also smell it and taste it and hear it. Everything just overlaps. All the senses overlap and blend together. And when you first feel it, it's extremely overwhelming. And then something kicks in you, and you just adjust to it. And then there was the commander of the ship, who was more like a really loving father figure. And he says, I have some things that I need to show you. And he says, we're going to go to the moon of the past when you were there. And I want to show you some things on Mars. And so we went kind of astral traveling in the hypnosis session. We flew over Mars. And he showed me that there were bases on Mars above ground and below ground. And he showed me that at the Cydonia area where the face and the pyramids were, there was actually human beings there doing an archaeological dig. They're actually doing archaeology there and excavating the whole site around the face and the pyramids. And I thought that was really interesting. I had no idea why I would be shown that. Nobody in the hypnosis, nothing in the hypnosis session indicated that I was part of that. I was just shown that there was an archaeological dig going on in that area. Then we took to the moon of the past, and he showed me an exchange that happened between an officer in charge of my time on the moon and a tall, slender extraterrestrial. And the extraterrestrial could look at me, and he could see my aura. He could see the people I was connected to, which was the Lyrans. And he was telling the officer telepathically, he said, you have no idea who you have there. Do you realize everything you're doing to her gets reported back to her people? And I guess this guy found that to be pretty startling. And I think that's what got me out of the program. I think that's when they took me back to Earth, and I was out of the whole thing. They wiped my memory, set me loose, and that was that. And I was just turned back loose into my life, and hopefully to wander around for the rest of my life and not remember anything, which didn't happen. And then recently, um, I went to um, the what is it called? Rebels of Disclosure conference that Journey to Truth put on in Missouri a year ago, May. And I met Tony Rodriguez for the first time. And it was like finding a long lost brother. I mean, we spent a lot of time together. We talked a lot. And he talked to me about any more memories I might have. And I said, I haven't tried digging for any more memories because the ones I have are so traumatic. I'm not sure I want any more. And he says, well, you should think about it. You should think about it because those, any memories that you have that you haven't recollected, they belong to you. They're part of your life. They're part of your life experience. And I thought about it, and I thought, maybe he's right. And I have always been curious about this Mars thing. So when I got back home, I started using a spiritual process to look at, unclaimed memories from this lifetime. And I got quite a bit of stuff. And then, as what happens to me in my life, exhaustion took over. I had a stint of time come where I had severe headaches for like 2 or 3 months that left me really exhausted and unable to get into that spiritual space of meditation where I could look at those memories. So that kind of cut it off, and I'm hoping to get back to it. But what I did get back was pretty amazing.